here I would see something. And it's just like that for me with the Bible. I can read a book of the Bible. Let's take Genesis, the book we're going to start next week, which we've all read probably more than once. If you're like me, you've read it several times. It's kind of the front of the Bible. So if I decide I'm going to read the Bible, the 15th time I was going to read the Bible in a year, I would always start in Genesis, and I'd get through Genesis and a few more, and then I'd hit Numbers, and then it'd be like, okay, I'm done. I can't read anymore. So then we move on to someplace else. But the Bible, we would start in Genesis. I've read it probably a dozen times if I read it once. And yet, when I pick it up and read it again, as I have this past month, there are things that pop up. And I have to ask myself, did I know that? Did I remember that? I know that I read it. I know that I read it all the way through. It hasn't changed. Nobody, it didn't suddenly appear in my Bible. And yet it was like reading it again for the very first time. So confession. I'm going to give you my confession of what surprised me this time as I was reading the book of Genesis. So when I began to read it, creation, got that one down. Adam and Eve got that. The fall, no problem. Cain and Abel, I'm a cop, I understand murder, no problem. Go through those things, and then I get to chapter 20. And we're talking about Sarah and Abraham. This is where Abraham passes Sarah off of his sister to King Abimelech, just like he did one time before with the Pharaoh in Egypt. So he's got a little history of doing this. Now I remember that. Yeah, he did it twice. First time with Pharaoh, second time now with the king. I wasn't surprised by that. But then I read one verse, and the verse said, "She really is my sister. We both have the same father, but different mothers." And I went, did I know that? I don't know how I missed that. I'm sure I knew that. As I read through that, it just suddenly surprised me. Of course, now you're thinking, this guy's teaching us the Bible up here, if he didn't know that after reading Genesis all that many times. But the point is as we read the Bible, we find new things all the time. I know that you've experienced this. I know that as you're reading it, and sometimes I believe that it finds us where we're at. It's where my mind is. It's where my heart is. It speaks to me. I truly believe that's why it's called the living Word of God. Because it speaks to me and it finds me wherever I'm at. And something speaks to me from the Word. Hebrews 4:12 tells us, "For the Word of God is alive and powerful. It is sharper than the sharpest two-edged sword, cutting between soul and spirit, between joint and marrow. It exposes our innermost thoughts and desires." The Word of God is powerful. It is the most powerful book ever written. Not because it was written by men of wisdom, because it is truly the inerrant Word of God. And I hope all of you realize and recognize that. Now to the Old Testament. So my little flyer. It has 39 books as compared to the New Testament, which has 27 books. Total of how many books in the Bible? 66. These books were written the Old Testament was written over a period of about 1,000 years. It represents what we'll call the older covenant between God and his chosen people, versus the new covenant that's represented in the New Testament. It's truly a mistake to believe that the Old Testament is not worth studying. There are those who believe that the Old Testament is, that's history, that's the old stuff, that doesn't apply to us, none of that is ours. That we just need to look at the New Testament. I've even heard people say the words of Jesus is all that matters. I just read the red letters in the Bible. I don't care about anything else, I just read the red letters. Well, that is really shortening your view and your understanding of what God has done and what God's plan was for us, for you as an individual and for each of us. Both the Old Testament and the New Testament are profitable for the modern-day Christian. In fact, without the writings, now known as the New Testament, the original Christians could only refer to the Old Testament. The books that we know today as the New Testament weren't written until sometime after Jesus' birth, his ministry, his death, and his resurrection. All of that came after. So new Christians really had to look at the Old Testament, where they found prophecy, telling and foretelling the coming of Jesus, and from which they drew strength and comfort. The books of the Old Testament are of various lengths. Obadiah is 21 verses, roughly 2 pages, barely 2 pages, while the book of Psalms is